The beautiful sun had set in the land of Egypt, where the children of Israel were kept in bondage. And Moses comes to the scene as the mighty deliverer of God, a warrior that had been sent by God so that he could go and lead his people out of the land of bondage into the land that he had prepared for them as he had promised their forefathers. They go through a journey that was not without questions, but in the end, they were at the verge of Jordan. The Lord announces to Moses that the appointed time for the possession of the Canaan land was at hand. And as the aged prophet stood upon the heights overlooking the river Jordan and the promised land, he gazed with a deep interest upon the inheritance of his people. Would it be possible for the sentence pronounced against him for his sin at Kadesh might be revoked? With deep earnest he pleads with God that he may go over and see the good land that is beyond Jordan, even the land of Lebanon. But so coldly, he restrains him from speaking no more on the subject and tells him that you shall go up to Mount Pisgah and only see the land, but you shall not go over this Jordan. Moses submits to the decree of God, but his anxiety is for the people of Israel. Wondering who could be able to feel the interest for their welfare after his departure, he pleads with God to set a man over the congregation, which may go in and out before them, to lead them, that they may be not as the sheep that is without a shepherd. God agrees and commands that he should take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom the Spirit of the Lord was before them. After Joshua is set apart as the new leader of Israel, Moses is directed to rehearse to them the history of their deliverance from Egypt and their journeyings in the wilderness. He reminds them, saying, "The Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you because you were more in number than other people. For you were the fewest of all people, but because the Lord loved you." Having known his people, Moses is quick to remind them that when the Lord thy God shall have brought you into the land which he swore unto thy fathers, and when you shall have eaten and be full, beware lest thou forget the Lord. Take heed unto yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God. Moses completes the work of writing all the laws and the statutes and judgments which God had given him, and all the regulations concerning the sacrificial system. Still filled with fear that the people would depart from the Lord, Moses calls heaven and earth to record that he had set life and death before them. As the pillar of cloud stood by the door, the people committed to Joshua and his leadership. And then, the work of Moses as a leader of Israel ended. But he does not forget to encourage his successor. "Be strong and of good courage, Joshua, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land." Even in the midst of all our difficulties, God will bring us into the land. As the people gazed upon the aged man, so soon to be taken from them, they recalled with a new and deeper appreciation his parental tenderness, his wise counsels, his untiring labors, and how often when their sins had invited the just judgment of God, the prayers of Moses had prevailed with him to spare them. Their grief was heightened by the remorse. They bitterly remembered that their own perversity had provoked Moses to the sin for which he must now die. It's a lesson we should all learn, that God speaks to his people in a blessing bestowed, and when these are not appreciated, he speaks to them in blessings removed. that they may be led to their sins and see their sin, acknowledge their sin, and return to him with all their hearts. And now Moses must go up to Mount Nebo and behold the land of Canaan, which God will give to his children, the children of Israel, for a possession. The one who had often left the camp in obedience to the divine summons to commune with God now has to depart on a new and mysterious errand to die. He knew he was going to die alone with no earthly friend permitted to minister to him in his last hours of death. He was about to be separated from the people he loved, but he had learned to trust in God nonetheless. And with unquestioning faith, he committed himself and his people to his love and mercy. Moses turns from the congregation and in silence and alone made his way up to the mountainside, up to the mountain of Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, so that he could die. Upon that lonely height, he stood and gazed with undimmed eye upon the scene spread out before him. Far away to the west lay the blue waters of the great sea, and in the north Mount Hermon stood against the sky. To the east was the tableland of Moab, and beyond lay Bashan, the scene of Israel's triumph, and away to the south stretched the desert of their long wanderings. And in solitude, Moses reviewed his life, from his birth to the prospective prince. He called to mind those long years in the desert with the flocks of Jethro, the appearance of the angel in the burning bush, and his own call to deliver Israel. As Moses reviewed the result of his labors, his life of trial and sacrifice seemed to have been almost in vain. Yet, he did not regret the burdens he had borne. He knew that his mission and work were of God's own appointing. As he looked back upon his experience as a leader of God's people, one wrong act marred the record. And now, a panoramic view of the land of the promise was presented to him. Every part of the country was spread out before him, not faint and uncertain in the dim distance, but standing out clear, distinct, and beautiful to his delighted vision. In this scene, it was presented not as it then appeared, but as it would become, with God's blessing upon it. Moses saw the chosen people established in Canaan, as well as a view of their history after the settlement in the promised land. His worst fears were confirmed by the apostasy which caused the glory of God to depart from among them. As Moses beheld the final rejection of the people so highly blessed of heaven, those he had toiled and prayed and sacrificed, even willing that his own name should be blotted out of the book of life, as he listened to the fearful words, "Behold, your house is left unto you desolate," his heart was broken, and bitter tears fell from his eyes. In sympathy with the sorrow of the Son of God who must die, another scene opens to his view, the earth freed from the curse, lovely than the fair land of the promise, so lately spread out before him. There is no sin in that land, and death cannot enter. There, the nations of the saved find their eternal home. With joy unutterable, Moses looks upon the scene and the fulfillment of the more glorious deliverance than his brightest hopes have ever pictured. Their earthly wanderings forever past, the Israel of God have at last entered the goodly land. Home at last is the cry. Home at last. As the vision fades away, his eyes rest upon the land of Canaan as it spreads out in the distance. And then, like a mighty warrior, as he has been, the mighty servant of the Lord lay down to rest. In the land of Moab, over against Beth-peor, he was buried, but no man knows where his grave ever was. Jesus is coming back again so that he can take us home. Whatever happens, child of God, get yourself back up and keep moving and fight for your salvation with fear and trembling. So much is at stake for you to be stuck. Keep pushing until we make it to the kingdom. And when we shall be home at last, what a joy that will be. Until then, let us sing a song that will cheer us by the way, for in a little while we are going home. We are going home. It might take a little while than we expected, but how cheering is the Christian's hope. Cheer up, my brother, for sweet promise is given to those that believe.